I'm going to talk about an experience that I had this past week. Not great. I was less than pleased about it, but I think it's something that, I mean, and I literally have had this conversation with other journalists, okay? So I like other journalists have identified this as being a problem in this state. Not to mention I hear about it from activists all the time. So, what I'm going to do here is, scrolling through New Hampshire politics Twitter the other day, and I noticed that there was, let's see. So, okay. I'm going to pop this up. I'll pull up the article as well, but this is what I had seen. This is the tweet that I caught. And it's just, their door is ready for the return of restaurant dining. Okay. My initial thing, like, maybe it's a knee jerk. Maybe I'm overreacting. I don't know if that's 6 feet. Like, angle? I don't know. It just doesn't seem like, and if it is, it's like barely 6 feet. It's like right on 6 feet. But that's eyeballing it. And I don't know. It looks like it's maybe 4 feet. Can't tell. So I had replied to this, they had another photo up, again, 6 feet. What I'm thinking here when I'm looking at these photos, and let me pull up the actual articles and get off Twitter for a second, okay? Because I know people really hate Twitter, for good reason, but a lot happens there. So here's the original article, and there's a lot of applause here. And the thing about it is that, like, when I look at this article, right, to me, it would seem that this journalist walked up, asked the owners about what was going on, what they were doing. The owners told them. The journalist wrote it down, and then they left, and they went and they wrote an article because they like it. And let's be honest, Red Arrow is like a huge part of New Hampshire, not just in Manchester, but everywhere. It's like a really well-known state establishment. So I understand why people are like eager to get it back. Just like anybody would be eager to get any of their services back. I'm not smashing on that. But, okay. It is also the job of a journalist at a time where there's a pandemic that's killing people. And like, we literally just had the highest new reported quantity of cases in like the last couple days in this country. Okay. So the idea that like things are good is ridiculous, right? Like, removing some restrictions is not the same thing as saying the pandemic is over. And for journalists to not bear that in mind, right? Like, and to really like I have talked to a bunch of journalists who are like, I really just like writing pieces that make people feel good. You know what? Cool. That's also not actually the job. Sorry. Like, it's not. The real job of the journalist is to make sure that we all know what's going on. Like, contextually. Okay? Sometimes, yes, it's about bolstering up really important parts of our community, but that's always got to be weighed within the context of everything else that's happening, right? Like, you can't just say fluffy stuff for the sake of saying fluffy stuff all the time, right? Like, I want just as much as anyone to have my restaurants back, right? Like, I care about that. That matters to me. But I also want them back for the long term. And anybody that's looked at a chart of how the flu pandemic happened, the second bump on that chart is like 3-4 times as tall as the first one, and we're still on the first one. So for anybody who's like just gonna be foolhardy about it, it's ridiculous. Now, my point to this was like, hey, someone could read this article, think this is a good idea, but we as the reader have to rely on the journalists to verify. Like we sort of count on that in a sense, right? Or we count on ourselves to vet this, which is basically what happened, right? So I had brought up like, hey, this doesn't look quite far enough. I don't know why we're not questioning that. I don't know why this isn't something that's being grilled. And this was the response I got. Sorry. Like, appears a journalist needs to fact check stuff, right? And when I brought up this criticism, right? Like, you know, to the extent that, like, let's see if I can pull up what I said, this is the fact of the matter. If you're going to report on a successful reopening where distance guidelines are a key component, maybe you should bring a tape measure. And I didn't, her follow-up to that was like, I didn't have a problem with it, like, because she admits she's going to bring it next time. I'm like, I'm happy she said that, right? But then the conversation changes. The conversation changes when she says, I'm just the messenger. And this is the problem that I take with journalism generally, but something that I have a serious problem with here in this state, and is this like this concept of impartiality, right? When she says I was just driving by and it caught my eye, yeah, that's because she has a subjective experience. That stuck out to her. Okay? That's not even remotely unbiased. Selection is bias. Okay? Every time a journalist goes to write a story, whether they try as hard as they can or not to remain impartial when presenting all sides of the situation, the act of examining the situation itself is a form of bias. Okay? That's just it. All right? We got to deal with this, right? Everybody's got to confront the fact that every single thing you ever consume is presented through a layer of bias. It's like, I think, like this was the stuff that like Nietzsche was talking about this, right? Like, objectivity is a false thing. I'm sort of over it. I'm sort of over this concept of objectivity. And, and at that point, she just kind of turns into like, telling me, well, you sound like a great candidate for our VIP membership service, right? Like, you know what? Sorry. I like supporting local journalism, but I am not going to pay somebody to make their work better. Like that. That's her job. Okay? Like, it's her job to go out and vet everything. And I, like, after a certain point, it's like, I'm saying, like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't know why you're turning this into like a marketing opportunity right now. Like, we're trying to talk about how there's a potential risk of you recommending a restaurant that might not meet guidelines because you didn't confirm it. And then your article is going to inspire folks to go to this restaurant where there could potentially be an outbreak. And you know what? At that point, I would say it's almost more on the journalist for that outbreak than it is for the restaurant. And the reason I say that is because that might not have been as widespread if the journalist hadn't pushed it up, right? So there's a certain amount of irresponsibility behind just like not thinking, writing this kind of article through. And that's something that I wish that journalists would keep in mind when you're dealing with something as intense as this, right? If you're not taking a moment to pause and really re-examine, right? Like shit, the reason I get blown out for whatever is because, I don't have like professional credentials, or I don't do all the vetting, or like I have bias. Yeah, like, you know what? So do all of them. And I'm not above them. But the difference between me and them is I accept full blown that this is how it is. Okay? If you seriously want to entertain a concept of journalistic integrity sans philosophy, then I don't know how you get through your day and make decisions. Like that, I just don't. I don't know. I don't understand how that's possible, especially when like those codes of ethics are really like beat into journalists. So whatever, right? Like, I don't want to dwell on this too much. Again, this woman, Carol Robidoux, who wrote this article, she's written over 6,000 articles. I am certain that the vast majority of them are not messed up like this. Okay. And she even cops to the fact that sometimes it's just like she's just not on top of herself. And you know what? Like, there is a certain amount of like, yeah, give journalists a little bit of room because they're human. But it is also like pretty well their responsibility to not, like, I have been denied opportunities over for not having like a critical enough eye on myself. And it's like I don't know where the bar is then, right? Like, I don't actually understand what the bar of like, well, I'm authoritative, but you're not, right? And somewhere in this, she actually says to me that like she says something to me along the lines of like without me, you wouldn't even know what to be mad about. And it's like, if that's not the highest form of condescension, like, I'm the keeper of all the information and you're just the plebe that doesn't understand, so you should just shut up and read what I have to say. Like, no, man. No, not a good look. Not a good look. And an organization that I heralded earlier in this stream, and I still maintain that they're a great organization, but Granite State News Collaborative just retweeted her like it was nothing. And I really don't understand that. And I like, look, if Carol or somebody from Granite State News Collaborative wants to come on and have this conversation with me, I'm happy to do it. And I'll let them know that we're doing this segment today. Because like, I just want to talk about it. I'm not trying to vilify anybody, but like, if we can't have an honest critique of exactly how we engage in journalistic integrity, then I really genuinely do not know what we're doing here. I just don't. So, sorry. Sorry for that salt. I definitely got a little bit heated about it, but it's a little concerning sometimes, though. That's just my take on it.